to you by Feelalytics. I'm Michelle Stinson Ross.
And I'm Tina Schweiger.
And today we are carrying on our conversation about experiencing emotions. So, over the course of this season, we've talked about um, emotional awareness, some of the challenges of it, and now we're moving from that awareness to actually starting to talk about skills and understanding how to make better use of those emotions without trying to force ourselves to feel something in particular. And so today we're talking particularly about some technical terms, some clinical type terms, and we're talking about affect. So that's where I want to start us is actually just providing a good definition so we're all on the same page. And then talking about positive and negative affect, first of all, what is it? And how is it used in a clinical setting?
Yeah, that's a great way to get started. Affect synonymously is almost emotion. Affect, it means how we feel in the moment. How are we experiencing emotion? And just as you would imagine, positive affect is experiencing emotions that feel good, that are uplifting, that are things like enthusiasm or optimism, or just having a really ability to focus tightly in the moment and get things done. Sometimes that feels good. Happiness, joy. Negative affect is those things that are more akin to stress, fear, being embarrassed, feeling like you have brain fog, or maybe you're having this kind of a negative experience of emotions. That would be negative affect. This is not too hard.
Well, and I like this in particular because we talk a lot about the judgmental aspect of experiencing emotion, in that we are taught as young children that it's just not appropriate to act out, to yell, scream, whatever. And we get this message as kids that anger is bad and you shouldn't
Mm.
experience it and you should stop trying, stop being so angry. I can't tell you how many times I've been told, stop being so angry. But in talking about affect, we can kind of remove that judgmental aspect from it and realize that there are certain emotional experiences that feel good in our body and we want to replicate and make more of those happen, and there are others that don't feel so great and it's a signal that we need to change something.
You bring up such a good point, Michelle. It's so tempting to think that a positive affect is a good thing and a negative affect is a bad thing. And in fact, there is a little bit of freedom that can come with the realization that it's natural and normal and non-judgmental to notice a positive feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's natural, normal, mindful, and non-judgmental to notice a negative feeling. And just because you're noticing a negative feeling doesn't necessarily mean that you're judging that feeling. So I guess here's the distinguishment, or distinguishing factor. I don't think that's a word. Distinguishing factor is um, I have a negative feeling. I have stress. I'm noticing that I feel stress. That's a very physical sensation. It gives me a migraine, or there's a lot of different ways I can think and talk and observe my own stress.
It's unpleasant. We don't
It
want to
is.
feel this.
That's the part that's the judging part. When you start saying, this negative feeling is now making me feel, now I'm getting angry about the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we're layering the judgment on
Yep.
those feelings. So are you feeling a feeling? Or are you feeling a feeling about a feeling? Simple stuff, right?
Yeah, we might have to slow that one down.
Let's slow it down. We could do that. There's our next topic. Does just
So
that.
this terminology in particular is frequently used in like clinical and therapeutic settings. And while we want to make clear that neither of us are therapists, there is no diagnosis or really advice even going on here, other than we just want to provide you with information so that you can make decisions on your own. But this is terminology that usually shows up in a professional therapy type setting, right, Tina?
Yeah. I mean, you'd find it in different, like, so in therapy, they might be measuring something. So they might be measuring, like, the depression scale is a measure of negative affect.
Okay.
You know, stress level scales are measures of negative affect. Emotional intelligence assessments can be considered in some sense a measure of positive affect, because it can measure your problem solving skills, your executive function, your overall well-being. There are measures for positive affect as well. So it's simply a way to talk about how to categorize those assessments.
Mhm. And they're also used in science because we use the positive and negative affect scale, PANAS, which I
Yes.
included in that question, as part of our emoji study that we did.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the scale is from about 1982, early 80s. A couple of psychologists developed the scale and then used it. It's been used quite a bit in a lot of research, and it's very well validated and a very simple scale that just says, right now in the moment, or relating to a period of time, or relating to an event, how much happy do you feel? How much stress do you feel? How much angry do you feel? And then there's a little scale from 1 to 10, and then you'll ask your brain how you feel, and then you'll somehow do some magical converting in your head into a number, and then you'll try to pick the right number on a scale. Which is a little hard,
It's a little hard,
but it
but
works.
it's
It's a way to do
been
it.
effective for 40 years. So,
Yep.
okay. Um, so you actually mentioned in the moment, and I want to bring another term that uses affect, that is affective event theory. What is that, first of all?
That is a psychological framework, and it emerged in the mid 90s. The psychologist Howard M. Weiss and Russell Cropenzano, apologies if I mispronounced that, Cropenzano. And that is drawing a connection between events, particularly in the workplace, usually, and how those events impact our individual experience of affect, whether it's a positive affect or a negative affect, and then how those emotions in turn influence longer term attitudes and longer term behavior choices.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of basic 2 sentence breakdown of affective event theory.
Cool. So you mentioned the workplace, and I do want to talk quite a bit about the workplace, but truly, this idea that emotions can be triggered by events isn't just a workplace thing. It
No.
shows up all across life, right?
Yeah. And I think they can be intermingled, right? So I have a story just from this morning.
Mhm.
In my workplace here, my studio manager, Emma, who oddly gets to be my case study quite a bit. She's had some affective personal events. She woke up to find out her car had been broken into this morning. So that's an event. Your car is broken into, while nothing was stolen. Her negative affect is one of feeling violated and feeling like,
Right.
oh, this is just terrible. So that's a personal event. That's an affective event. And then once she arrives at the workplace, she goes, she's like, I think we should get some coffee. It's like, yeah, that'd be great. Get some coffee. Goes to get some coffee, and she meets a coffee shop person who is having an affective event.
Oh no.
The, the coffee shop barista is on the phone with a particularly demanding customer. She has a customer, standing and waiting for an order, and a customer on the phone, while she's making eye contact in the moment with a real life customer, and the customer going, well, how are these, pastries made, and can I get this in this amount of time, and just being a pretty demanding customer and keeping her on the phone. So what happened was this affective event by this employee that they're experiencing at work impacts the personal affective events of the customers who are there just trying to get a cup of coffee. And in turn, that affected that employee's performance, the coffee shop barista, because she was feeling stress from this event of being pressured by a call-in customer while there's people standing in the store, completely gave my studio manager the wrong order. She ordered a focaccia and got a quiche. She's like, well, I guess it's okay. I was thinking about the quiche anyway. And I was like, this is just another event in your personal day. That's not the greatest day ever event. Not a terrible day. I mean, let's be real. There's a lot worse days we can have. And there's a lot of people that are having a lot worse days for sure. But it's a common thing. So that's kind of how those intermingle.
I really found it interesting that as we were planning this episode, you had said to me that affective event theory basically boils down to trigger warning here.
Yeah, that's our cultural appropriation of the scientific terminology is trigger warning. You do see that. I think isn't it getting like what is it, the reputation for wokeness or something? I don't know. But yeah. So a trigger warning is simply a way to call out a negative, an event that you could plan for or anticipate or experience that will be a negative affect inducing event.
Mm-hmm. True. Let's talk a little bit more about the reality of how this shows up. I mean, you gave a really great example of both personal and in a workplace type setting, but let's be real. As we try and navigate, say, our work life, and for those of us that actually either work on a team or we manage a team, that sort of thing, how do we use this type of information knowing that there are going to be events that are going to set off certain types of emotional experiences? How do we use that information to be a little bit better at what we do every day?
I think it's an excellent mindful frame of reference. It's a nice way to think about your plans, your strategic and tactical plans for your team, and thinking through those plans. And often we can get really focused on outcome.
Mm-hmm.
What is the outcome? What is the timeline? What's the deliverable? We have a lot of very strict parameters and things that we're trying to accomplish. But if we simply layer over a little bit of affective event planning, that's very helpful, because then it gives us a framework by which to think about how these plans might impact people's emotional states,
Mm-hmm.
and to realize that, do we need to plan for additional support in certain cases, and to enhance those plans to kind of plan ahead and not be shocked or taken aback when you make a strategic decision, you take some action in the workplace, and that has maybe a backlash. It didn't go over so well. People are upset. If you think through in advance, well, how might this impact this person's feeling on the team, or that person's feeling, or, this person has a history of being kind of the devil's advocate, if you will. This person's always going to be the one that's going to poo-poo every plan that comes out. And that in turn is going to, stress out the sensitive person over here that really needs a lot of positive reinforcement in order to thrive. That person, if they're constantly paired with the devil's advocate that's poo-pooing on everything, that can dramatically impact the performance and outcomes that your business is looking for. Mm-hmm. So proactive planning is a really key component to managing affective events at the workplace.
Certainly. So, safe to say there are certain say, emergency situations that we can kind of plan for and go, look, if something really bad happens, then here's what we're going to do to
Yeah.
that. But there are other aspects of work life that aren't emergency. They are definitely planned and things that, are quite normal to go through. I'm thinking about like an event that is technically a buyout, like you're part of a company that's getting bought or acquired by another company. And while overall, that's actually a very good positive thing for the company, there's going to be better support, there's going to be better, capital, any number of things that are beneficial to the company at large. As you've experienced, Tina, sometimes that acquisition comes with some cultural challenges. And again, what the event being, the acquisition is by and large positive. What else might happen to, as you said, create these attitudes and long-term feelings about working at that particular place with that particular team that you might want to be aware of moving forward.
Shameless plug, Michelle, that's what makes me so excited about the work we're doing in Philolytics.
Mm-hmm.
It's meant just for affective events. And you mentioned a buyout or a merger, acquisition, and all the good things that come with that: increased resources, more capital, increased shareholder value, whatever it may be, higher paychecks. It does come with fear of the unknown. We like to lump that into, oh, it's just the cultural problems or the cultural clash, or we're going to have culture issues. Okay, let's unpack that just a little bit more and see what that actually is. And when you do look at it through a frame of affective event theory, a merger is an affective event. Anything is, but how does it break down into a bunch of, how does it impact the plans and the bits and pieces of events and process that are going to happen along the way as we get down the path?
Mm-hmm.
And rather than just sort of lumping it all under, oh, this is just going to impact the culture and we might have some attrition, we might have some people that are upset. We never want to, we don't want to lose people. It costs money, it costs time, and you have to replace them and all this stuff. So be proactive in planning and think through a little bit more detail about where can you overlay rewards and recognition, for example. Thinking through like maybe a small step in a larger process. And if it's completed successfully, let's take a moment to have a moment of recognition and reward and lift up the positive affect as we are going through a larger event. Conflict resolution. Conflict will come up as you're dealing with cultural issues and mergers and combining teams or things like that, or any kind of situation. Really, conflict comes up. So when is conflict likely to emerge in this situation? As you think through roles and how they might change or how they need to evolve, you might think of the design of a job and the design of the role kind of back to, pairing a devil's advocate with a sensitive person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the design of that team should adjust to make sure the personalities don't trigger negative affect events when they don't need to be triggered. Like, let's try to plan for them.
Right.
And feedback loops. And I think that's probably the most important part of all of this, is staying in close contact with people. People are reluctant to share feelings. They're worried that if they share, especially a negative feeling, that they'll get backlash for that.
Mm-hmm.
They're worried that if they share too much of a positive feeling, maybe they'll get a reputation as, being too Pollyanna or too enthusiastic, or people are always hyper paranoid and hyper concerned about how they're perceived in the workplace, rightly so. So asking proactively how people feel about a variety of different micro steps in a larger plan, as well as the larger plan, will help people feel heard and will help them process the affect that the events are stirring up.
This leads me to my last question. So as we think about organizing emotions, it's again not judging them, but
Right.
organizing and beginning to understand both the emotion and the event that triggers it. Um, how does this help us with our emotional experiences, the experiences of a team at work, that sort of thing?
So being mindful of this helps us practice and train ourselves and train others in the habits of paying attention to affect in the workplace and at home. Paying attention to that and developing those skills allow us to become more resilient in the face of negative affect. That allows us to have a bit more courage and psychological safety in speaking up when something is causing a big amount of affect in the workplace, whether it's positive or whether it's negative. Just simply addressing and making this a part of the normal day-to-day culture and expectations and norms and traditions of a company will improve the overall emotional well-being of employees, and that in turn trickles down to the personal life, and it helps us maintain a better work-life integration or work-life balance, if you will.
Well, and those types of processes and skills, and I really want to start leaning into the skills a little bit. So over time, we've been developing basically just the skill of paying attention and
Mhm.
becoming more aware of what we're feeling. Again, not trying to control it, not trying to judge it, but just be more aware of it. That as we've really gotten that skill mastered, sort of, you never really master some of these skills, but we can start to layer other things on. And what you were saying about making this a part of the way the workplace culture works also applies to family culture, the way that we engage with our partners, with our children, um, especially in parenting. I mean, that's the thing that just like really
Yes.
comes into my
Yeah.
brain is how much this is important to parenting.
I want to give a shout out to the ADHD dude on YouTube. I like this guy.
Mhm.
We'll have to send him over a link to our podcast because I'm a subscriber and I watch his episodes. And he talks particularly about a parenting style that's effective for kids with ADHD. And it's to be authoritative, not authoritarian, but authoritative and empathetic at the same time.
Mhm.
And I think that's really, in a nutshell, dealing with affect as a parent in how you're thinking through parenting your children, knowing how your children tend to react to certain situations and in observing those, but then being a little bit more proactive in your plans and planning for the what you're going to do with the family and how it's going to impact people, and having the backup plans and knowing that if we can't get to this place on time because of a meltdown for whatever reason, that what is the backup plan, what is the plan B, so as to limit the reverberating affective events of parenting, which is your kid melts down and it makes you really stressed. So, so thank you, ADHD dude, for also, I think, defining the difference between authoritative and the authoritarian, because authoritarian creates lots of negative affect, and authoritative can create a lot of clarity
Mhm.
and also help mitigate some of the negative affect. So
Okay,
by providing structure.
thank you for saying clarity and mitigation, because as you were talking, what came up for me is, again, we talked about, hey, a factive event is basically trigger warning, right? And I think about not only my friends that have ADHD. I don't. I'll admit I'm very neuronormative in regards to the world outside, but also our colleagues and friends that are on the autism spectrum. I know that one of the things that our colleague Allison has told us often is really beginning to be able to label and understand, even if it's just the simple positive negative. If we could just
Hmm.
like sort out that much. She
Hmm.
says that it's been really effective in helping her understand what triggers her and what it triggers,
Hmm.
and, you know, how to recognize, oh, I'm going into meltdown, and maybe pull back out of that before it gets severe. Because even for adults on the spectrum, that meltdown is still a possibility.
Oh man, working with Allison is so amazing. I one of the things that was so helpful for her is identifying her core values. Uh, we think that might be a simple thing, and on the surface, it seems like a simple thing. But the way that I like to coach people to think about their core values is to think about the things that really piss you off. And that's when you know you found your core value. And I think that's where you know how you as a person and how your values individually and your individual differences um, interact with the events at the workplace and the events at home that are the things that do trigger you in a negative way. It comes down to how you see the world and what you feel. This is the way that things should be done. This is the right way. If you're not doing it this way, there is something wrong with you. That will trigger you pretty much every time. And we all have those values and they're all different. And so when I helped her identify what her values were, she could see where she was getting triggered a little bit more clearly in her day to day life. And it was allowing her to become more aware of why she was feeling and reacting the way that she was in the moment, and really helped her increase that awareness of her emotion. Um, I had another place I was going to take that thought, and I've
Lost it
completely
for
lost it.
a moment. It
You
happens.
mentioned clarity and ADHD. The clarity, yeah. So the structure and the you kind of getting back to the ADHD dudes, topic of structure or in clarity and like the authoritative, like just putting the structure in place and providing that clarity. You can do that internally with yourself, especially if you are neurodivergent and you do tend to get a little bit more triggered more often than neurotypical people. Understanding your core values and understanding that as a structure, as a mental structure, a mental construct, will help you have something, some scaffolding to kind of rely on as you move throughout the day and in your work and your personal life. And it does provide you with a lot of structure when you can't always count on your coworkers and your bosses to provide it. The best thing is, this is, here are the expectations, here's the work day, here's the structure. We're not perfect, and our bosses and
Mhm.
managers aren't, and we can never provide all the structure that would be ideal for neurodivergent people. But it would be something that we can all work on internally
Mhm.
to help provide our own structure and clarity.
Right. And this is again where the parenting skills come in, because not only are we responsible for a plan B, all those kinds of things, because meltdowns with our kids are going to happen, but part of the skill of parenting is also beginning to instill those skills in our kids as well.
Yeah.
They learn how to navigate and organize and come up with healthy coping mechanisms for the world around us.
Yeah, and I think my kids are 8 and 11, so they're not little. They're not full grown. They're kind of in the middle. And when they're little, simply the awareness and acknowledgement and helping them. Oh gosh, wow, it seems like you're really upset by that. Does that really upset you? That when they're little, just yeah, that's really upsetting me. Yeah, mom, that's really upsetting. Just that level of awareness is really good, and not over, like sometimes I would think, oh gosh, okay, this is great. I'm getting them to recognize what their emotions are. Let's already teach them how to, it's just like be patient with it and know that just the awareness alone and modeling, what to do with it is probably appropriate for the littles. And then as you get more into middle school and get more into the, puberty era, where they're starting to form a little bit more maturity, that's when I think it's to have a little bit more intentional conversations and be more reflective. I did that this morning with my kid. We went over to visit a friend last night who'd had an injury. He had a concussion, and it's his best buddy. And we heard from his mom, he had an injury. Could you come visit him and really make him feel good? Now, my kid's first reaction was, "Oh man, I'm scared," which good on my kid. for immediately recognizing he was scared and saying, Mom, I'm scared to go see my friend who's gotten hurt. It's scary to think about your friend being hurt, and will they be okay? It could be very frightening. And I said, it's okay to be afraid, but we're going to go anyway. We're going to go anyway. You're mature enough. So we go. And then this morning, I kind of circle back on the way to school. Hey, you were afraid, when we went over to visit your friend last night, after you got there, how did that change? So having a conversation about not only in the moment recognizing and being aware of that emotion, but after some time passes and after the event, that's the affective event, has passed, coming back and circling back to that feedback loop and saying, hey, how did it change? How did your feelings change? Let's make a good point of reference to say, sometimes when I'm scared to see somebody because they're not feeling well, it'll be okay. I have a point of reference that gives me confidence and courage to go into some situations where I might otherwise be a little bit afraid to go. So that's kind of how I'm handling it right now.
Well, and that's so sweet, because that's also a sign of empathy too, that they care about their friend enough to go, yeah, I'm kind of worried about how I'm going to show up in this moment.
Yeah. It's so nice to just slow down sometimes, even when you're parenting, and really give yourself the space to explore the feelings that are happening all around you all the time, not only in you, but in your kids and in your partner and your friends and family, your coworkers as well. Just taking a moment to identify, address, and notice the changing states as they go by. It's I find it to create, gives me joy in life to do it, and I hope it does for you too.
So as we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to add in this segment talking about affect and the experience of emotion?
I think the thing to hone in on is just everybody's different, and something that might be an affective event doesn't mean that it's going to have the same impact on every individual. Everyone truly is different. Their histories are different. Their traumas are different. Their life experiences and relationships and states and current situations are all different and very complex. So keeping that in mind when thinking through the lens of affect in terms of your planning and your strategies in your personal and work life, really keeping a tight focus on the fact that everyone is truly different in how we experience things.
That is fantastic. Thank you for that last little bit of mindfulness, Tina. And I hope that everybody viewing this episode has a fantastic day.
I hope you do too. Have a good affective event today.